like, I'll be meeting you over here to my right to continue along our way.
In a sense, this room is the heart of the cross. Our next area is actually going to be on a second level. No, it is not like a hotel where it's first level, second level. The second level is just a basic room.
You can see why our engineer friends are eager to deal with this.
Is a strawberry tree to my right hand side. A little bit different than our typical strawberry bush. It's more in the cranberry family, and the fruits it produces not exactly good to eat directly from the tree itself. But strawberry trees are also the national symbol of Italy, and they attract songbirds, so everything planted down here by Balthasar was very intentional. We unfortunately lost the original strawberry tree, but we are lucky to have part of the stump still left, so you can see that it was a very huge tree. That is there. And citrus typically only lasts about 40 years naturally in the earth. The ponderosa lemon and that grapefruit tree here in the center are Balthasar's originals, so they are well approaching 100 years old. When we eventually lose the trees, the Forestiere family are always very careful to replant the exact same variety, which is what happened with that one car. We lost the original one, but they came in and replanted the exact same variety. So at this point, if everyone is ready, let's continue our tour. But I first want to pause here and point out something very, very important, which is right above me. Balthasar stood about 5'6". I am 5'5". That means he was just 1 inch taller than me. Of course, this is a custom-built home, so some of the archways are going to be very, very low and tiny. I encourage everyone in our group this afternoon to just be very careful as we enter some of these smaller spaces. If you follow me this way, please.
Watch your head. My favorite of these places where he carved it.
So as I was saying before, in 1906, Balthasar began to dig a small home underground. First his little bedroom, then his kitchen, and the area for his well. Once he moved downstairs, he was much cooler, more comfortable, could start to think a little bit more clearly. At that point, he began to wonder if he could grow anything down below instead of above ground. But he wasn't sure if his plan was even going to work because people back then weren't exactly growing completely subterranean. They still don't really do that today either. And because of that, he was not wanting to start with a giant tree first. He wanted to start experimenting with something much, much smaller. Herbs. This is Balthasar's original herb planter. Now today, unfortunately, we do not have herbs growing from it, but that's just because sometimes our visitors like to pick some of the herbs thinking that it's the original one. So we have to have other different plants in here. Now if you look up, you will see a skylight. Balthasar had to develop an entire system of skylights at his home and property. He wanted enough light to come in, to see, to grow his plants, but not too much sun that it would heat up the place. Again, in 1906, he was so desperate to escape that Fresno heat. Now this skylight is one of his earlier experiments. You'll see it's a little bit offset from the planter. When herbs get too much direct sunlight, they begin to burn very easily. So he was very interested in trying to find those perfect balances between direct and indirect sunlight and being so subterranean and dark down here. This herb planter is about an hour to an hour and a half worth of direct sunlight every single day. It's mostly in the shade, which allows the plant to thrive down here. Now if you look around the planter, you'll see it has 7 pillars around the edges. Balthasar liked to incorporate the numbers 3 and 7 into a lot of his building plans, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. And now if you look up right here, you will see some pieces of scrap metal. Balthasar was quite the recycler. He would take everything like mattress springs, chicken wire, even barbed wire, and use these pieces of metal as reinforcements for his archways and ceilings. He really wanted this entire place to last for many generations, and so far it has. And if you look up into the skylight, you will see some more pieces of metal up there, and you'll also see a very nicely placed edge piece right above the planter. When it rains, the water actually drips right off of that edge into the center of the planter, keeping it nice and damp down here. You'll see many examples of these really interesting little irrigation systems throughout our tour this afternoon. So at this point, if everyone would follow me this way, we're entering Balthasar's original home, dug in 1906. So welcome to the original kitchen underground. To my left, you'll see a stovepipe still in the wall. And right here, he would keep a wood-burning stove. Back to my right is my favorite area of this early home underground. This is actually Balthasar's kitchen pantry. You will see some grooves in the sides of the walls right here. He would have wooden slabs as shelving to keep all of his kitchen essentials nice and organized in this one area. Now if you look up, you will see another skylight. But this one looks a little bit different than one we just saw. That one is very small and circular, but this one is more cone-shaped. Again, he had a wood-burning stove underground in a really small area. As you can imagine, it would heat up quite a bit down here, especially in the afternoons. But the cone-shaped skylight actually allowed that heat to rise and exit very efficiently, keeping it nice and cool and well ventilated down below. We will see other examples of the cone-shaped skylight a little bit later on too. So at this point, we're going to head over to Balthasar's original bedroom to my right-hand
I
side.
have a question.
Yes.
We watched The Strange Inheritance.
Oh, yes.
And wasn't there a stove and some shelving? There were more things?
Yes. This was Balthasar's early home, a little bit later on in 1920s and 30s. He brought everything out of here and made himself something much nicer to live in. We'll see that area a little bit later on. I believe that's what was featured in that.
Do you know when that was filmed? About?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. We have many different series that feature us, so I'm not exactly sure what happened. But yes, people typically come to us having watched that specific one. Yes. I have not seen it myself.
Oh, it's a good one.
So here we are, standing in Balthasar's original bedroom, or the first hole that he dug underground for himself in 1906. Again, he was a very small man, only 5'6". When he was 25 years old, he did not need a lot of space. Behind me, you'll see the area that he kept his original headboard, and then his little bed would come out into the hallway like this. Now, Balthasar was an avid reader. He read constantly while underground by himself for 40 long years. To my right, you'll see his afternoon reading bench. He would come over here, enjoy a book or two. And then directly ahead from me, right over there where you're standing, is actually his evening or nighttime reading area. Now, at one point, there was a small lamp in that archway where he could hang a lantern for some light. This is 1906, and Balthasar did not have electricity down here, and it gets really, really dark, especially when all the candles and lanterns go off for the day. And to my right, all the way across that hallway where you all entered just a few minutes ago into the lobby area, you will see Balthasar's original well. At one point, he had to dig just between 30 and 40 feet below the surface to hit water. And of course, the placement of that well is very accessible to the early home. He could come right out of his kitchen or the bedroom, cross the hall, get his water for the day, but it has completely dried up. Today, if we wanted water from that specific well, we would have to dig about 170 feet below the surface to hit water. Everything here in the environment in the Central Valley has shifted so drastically, and that water table has dropped significantly in just 100 years. So at this point, you are welcome to look around the bedroom area or start heading back to the kitchen. When you're ready, I'll be waiting for you at the herb planter to continue our tour.
It's a little reading nook, huh?
Yeah, it needs a little bit.
Pretty safe.
Yeah? Second mode?
So you just turn the camera around and you can look directly at it. Yeah.
I see. Let's give it
So I do want to show you a really good example of what that hard pin looks like naturally on Earth. It's all this exposed rock that we see in this area and back on that kitchen wall. So once again, not only was Baldassar carving out all of the hallways, passageways, and rooms, he was also carving out each individual brick and then laying them himself in that Roman-style architecture. And he was doing all the work by himself. He did not have a crew or team of workers with him, and it was all done by hand with shovels and pickaxes, wheelbarrows, and buckets. So there is absolutely no dynamite down here. And at this point in the tour, people typically ask me what the square footage is of his home. We will see 2.5 acres on our tour this afternoon. So we are not in square feet, we are in acres. But if you're really curious, that is about 108,000 square feet. So at this point, we're going to head over to our next stop, Baldassar's private chapel and his chapel courtyard. On our way there, we're going to pass right through Baldassar's later living quarters, built a few years after this early home. Now, we're not actually going to stop in that area yet, but we're going to loop back around a little bit later on the tour and spend some time there. Now, I know it's going to be very tempting to stop in this upcoming area and take some photos, but just do your best to stick with me. I promise we will be back. If you follow me this way, please.